Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Aquarium Online Academy at the Aquarium of the Pacific. My name is Alicia, and I'm excited to join you this afternoon. Now, if you'd like to join us today, I'm going to go ahead and have my friend Dana, who's helping me out in the studio right now, put up our number that you can text in on. Now, don't forget that you should have permission from an adult if you are texting. Also, normal texting rates do apply. So our number is 562-286-1838. If you have questions, we love your comments. If you have fun facts that I'm not getting to, but you think would be fun for everyone to know about, go ahead and text that in. You can always, of course, shout out your answers. You can tell a friend, tell a family member as you are participating with us today. And also, if you are joining us after we have already gone live, this is recorded, then you can always email us at live@lbaop.org. That's Long Beach Aquarium of Pacific.org. I also have my friend Stacy, who is going to be at the computer taking all of your questions and passing those along. So we have a whole team here, hopefully, to help answer your questions. Now, we'll go ahead and start by just making some observations of one of our webcams. I'll have Dana maybe pick one for us that seems interesting. Now, we're going to be talking all about ocean exploration today, how we are exploring and learning about our marine environments. The ocean is a huge place, and really it's only in the last 100 or so years that we've had the ability to really get a lot of information from the ocean, and we're still learning. There's still so much to be exploring. So let's go ahead and just take a look at one of our habitats here at the aquarium. Awesome. So right now we're looking at a lot of the animal life, right? Probably something that stands out the most to you. And there are many different careers that explore the biology, but there's also some of these what we call abiotic factors. So besides looking at the animals that are swimming around here, taking a peek at some of the things that might not be living in this habitat, but definitely play a role in the habitat. Yeah, if you're thinking the water, right? The water, the temperature of the water, things that include like how much sunlight, how deep is the water, how much oxygen is in the water. That plays a role for the animals that are living here. What about the water itself, right? So we're looking at a marine environment. So this is salt water. And salt water can change how salty it is. We call that salinity, depending on where you are in the marine environment. And some of those factors have to do with temperature. Some of those factors have to do with evaporation rates. So there's the chemistry side, there's the biological side, and there's the physical side, right? So there are many things to consider and explore that kind of make up these ecosystems. And there are many different careers that study or ask questions about these things and how they interact. So there's oceanography, for example, looks at a lot of those physical characteristics, but I won't say that any of these careers act by themselves because everything really influences themselves. It's usually if you're assigned to studying some of the ecosystems, you're really thinking about lots of these factors and how they interact with each other. So even if you're studying an animal in here, you're also probably studying some of those things that we talked about, like the amount of oxygen in the water, the temperature of the water, because there are levels that are happy for these animals, that are comfortable for these animals. Here at the aquarium, our animal care specialists and our husbandry department have to consider these elements even when designing and maintaining our exhibits here. So the animals have all of these things to make sure that they're well balanced. So when we explore our ocean and we start to discover lots of different habitats, especially as we go deeper, those are some of the things that we want to learn more about. And there are lots of different tools that we can use to kind of learn more about the physical, that biological, and the chemical elements that make up our oceans. So I wanted to share with you now, when we say exploration, we really mean just gathering information. And sometimes in our exploration, there are teams of people that are looking for something maybe in particular. Sometimes they're just out there using tools and gathering information about something that is unknown. And those questions come out a little bit later. There are several different organizations that explore our oceans, and I wanted just to introduce you to some of those and those tools. For example, we have had an opportunity to actually interface with the three main exploration organizations out there that I can think of. For example, the Smith Ocean Institute, we sometimes do live connections here at the aquarium with, and they have the research vessel, the Falcor. And the Falcor is a very large research vessel, and they will seek out teams of scientists to go for their explorations. And they have lots of really incredible tools. Now, the teams on the Falcor have invited the Aquarium of the Pacific staff members to come check out their vessel and also check out some of their tools. Now, one of the ways that we can explore some of these ocean habitats is through vessels, remotely operated vessels are submersibles. And the difference there is the remotely operated vehicles, and I can show you one called Sebastian. Sebastian. And Sebastian is really interesting. So just to tell you a little bit, Sebastian is a large remotely operated vehicle. And I think we have a whole picture of Sebastian. Maybe not anymore. But kind of like a personality. But Sebastian is about 7,000 pounds. It's a remotely operated vehicle. And the ROV can go down, I have my numbers written down here just to remember, 4,500 meters, which is about just over 14,700 feet, which is really incredible. And so that's the advantage of not having a person inside. And the vehicle itself has lots of tools. You can kind of think of it like a big robot. And the robot has sometimes these really incredible sampling devices, so that if we wanted to know a little bit about the, oh, here we go. Yay. Thank you. Okay, so here's Sebastian. And again, this is courtesy of the Smith Ocean Institute. And this is the picture here. And they have lots of, by the way, if you go to smithocean.org, as you can see here, or if you search for the Smith Ocean Institute, they have all kinds of really cool videos of the development team and the team of scientists who put together some of these vehicles. And it is, again, multidisciplinary. There are people that are working in many fields that come together, because it's not just the engineers, it's also the people who are trying to, of course, do the collections, and they want to know, they have these questions about the deep sea or these areas that are a little harder for someone in a manned vessel or a scuba diver to get to. And so having tools that are attached, such as these robotic arms, having water samplers on there so that they can take chemical samples of the water. And then they also have a lot of time sonar. So they have multi-beam sonar. They have devices on them that allow them to do mapping. And so we can talk about those in just a minute here. So we'll put that arm picture back up, which is pretty cool. So in order to control this arm, by the way, this arm can extend down. It can move. There's a hinge up here that can move it left or right. It can go open and closed. So that is a lot of mechanical movement. There is a lot of movement that can happen that can be very dexterous. So there is someone who is in the ship who is watching a monitor, and they have this controller, and I can have my friend Dana pull up this controller here, which is really cool. So they can see there's a camera on there for them, and it's kind of like a really cool video game. And so they're holding this controller, and they're able to manipulate that arm. So if they're taking a sample, let's say a rock sample, some sort of biological sample, or maybe even they've placed a net down very, very deep at the bottom, and they're going to bring up a live sample with maybe a fish or an organism in there, or even if they're placing a marker, they need these arms that you can manipulate in order to collect those samples. And so that's a really cool device on there. Now I think we have a picture too of the water samplers. So if you wanted to collect water down there at that depth, and I will say it's important to have some sort of chamber that can open and close remotely. And that's because if you are taking a sample of water where it's down deep and it doesn't close and you start to move up in the water column, then you could change the sample. The water might replace itself. So being able to capture this water at a depth. And sometimes what they do is they have a meter on there, so it's pre-programmed that can open and close for them. Sometimes they're able to control that from the surface. So you have to be able to, you can see there's some gauges on here. So you have to be able to have different equipment pieces that are testing the depth and can also either work remotely or be pre-programmed to open at that depth. And that's important. If you want to know how much dissolved oxygen, as they call it, how much oxygen is available to the animals to breathe at, let's say, 1,000 feet down, you want it to be able to open at that sample. So they'll come to the top, they come to the surface, and then they'll be able to test the water. So some things, for example, would be, again, that salt content. They can check the salinity. They can check how acidic, so the pH of the water, or there might be something else that they're sampling within, like nitrogen or phosphorus. They might be looking at some of those chemicals down in those habitats, which is pretty cool. Yeah, let's take a look at the control room. So Melissa asked, does Sebastian go into the ocean all the time for studies? That's a really good question. I would say that Sebastian is used when there is a team of scientists who are either commissioned or sometimes it's funding. So it's usually planned out for over a year. So the expeditions, as they call it, and you can go to their website, and for all of the organizations that we're going to talk about, you can go to their websites and kind of see all of the video footage or information collected, which is really cool that it's kind of open for people to learn about. And they're really great on sharing the things that they've learned and also what tools they're using. And so I wouldn't say that they go out all the time, but they do have several expeditions that go out usually per year, and usually they go out in the summer. And usually that's because the weather conditions for traveling in the ocean is a little bit better, and so it's not so choppy. If you're trying to deploy a 7,000-pound machine, you don't want it to be hitting the surface of the water, because it has to, and I say deploy, there's a giant crane that lifts it. You can actually see it. I feel like I'm sneaking in the control room here. There's a crane here that has to lift this ROV into the water, and then it moves the crane over the water and deploys it. So you don't want to be in really rough seas for that. Also, as you can imagine, there's lots and lots of cords that are being deployed in there, so you don't want that to be rubbing against the back of your vessel. So the summertime usually means that there's better chances for deployment into that marine environment. Now, we did have an opportunity to kind of connect and learn with the Falkor as they did their White Shark Cafe expedition, which was really cool. So I'll just tell you a little bit about that. They had all kinds of really cool equipment pieces that they were using. And now what they were trying to study is where great white sharks were going during a very particular time of the year. So typically off of our Southern California coast, we were finding young, or what we call juvenile, white sharks. And we find adult sharks. But we weren't finding out where maybe they were mating or having their babies. So they were wondering, where are white sharks going? And so it started by placing satellite tags, pop-up satellite tags, which is another device that can be used in kind of exploring the ocean, especially if you're looking at those biological features, those animals. And so they're placing this in the back of the shark right here. And it collects information about the shark as they dive down and come up. Now, a lot of this is stored in this satellite tag, and after a certain amount of time, it's programmed to kind of just boop, break off and go to the surface where it can be collected. And then it transmits that information to a satellite, which then transmits that to the scientist who's kind of waiting for that information to be given to them, which is really cool. And so they were gathering this information and finding that there was a certain location in a remote part of the Pacific Ocean that a lot of these sharks were visiting at the same time. And they didn't know if it was for food resources or for mating. And they suspected that there was something unique out there. So after planning for more than a year, gathering a lot of experts, and then putting together lots of different types of equipment, they were going to do kind of those 3 sample areas. They were going to do the biological, so trying to get samples from white sharks if they could. They were going to do the physical by testing the water, and the chemical by doing water samples. So they were deploying their Sebastian ROV. They were collecting water samples. They were collecting plankton samples by using big plankton nets. So planktons are small drifting organisms, and to kind of test to see, hey, is there a very rich, food web out here that's feeding bigger fish, that's feeding larger fish, that's feeding even larger fish, which might be prey for the white sharks. So what's going on out here? It was really cool. One of the things that I thought was most fascinating was what we call a sail drone. And the sail drone was deployed. There's the Falcor out here. So here's that research vessel that I was talking about. And this sail drone was deployed from the coast of California, and it was able to pick up on the satellite tags for the white sharks, as well as it had its own sonar. So it was taking measurements as it was being deployed, and it was remotely operated. So it was using solar panels, it was sailing out, it was relaying to a satellite the whole time. It is just this action-packed, remotely operated vehicle that literally sailed out to meet the vessel and collect and deliver this information. You can kind of imagine that there are teams of people who are deploying all kinds of instruments. You're not seeing much happening here, but off of the back of this vessel, there's a lot going on. So that was a really cool expedition, and they were trying to, from those 3 areas, put together what is happening in this area. And they did find out that there were a lot of really great food resources, and I still think that they're sifting through a lot of that information to see, because there's a lot of information that they gathered. I mean, a whole lot. So there is a lot of things for the scientists to still go through from those samples. Now, another organization I wanted to talk about was the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is NOAA. They have the Okeanos Explorer, and they have their ROV called the Deep Discoverer. And they're also really cool. They have I'm not sure if we have any pictures for the NOAA. Did we have some of that sonar? Oh, yeah, so we just had a question. Are there other ROVs like Sebastian? So yeah, we have the Deep Discoverer, which is NOAA's ROV. And then there's also the third organization that I wanted to talk about was the Ocean Exploration Trust. And maybe we'll go straight to the Ocean Exploration Trust. Now, I will say that we can come back to NOAA and the Okeanos, because I think we have some videos that we might share a little bit. Oh, okay. That's okay. I think that's pretty cool. So Dana's telling me that we have some videos that were collected. So one of the things we were talking about, water sampling and maybe taking measurements as they're being deployed, but they also can take video. And usually it's a two-part system. And so usually there's the ROV, and they can have a second smaller vehicle that rides behind to help with as a second lighting system for that ROV. So we can play maybe just an example, some of the footage. Oh, that's okay. This is an example. This is NOAA exploring the Marianas Trench, which is one of the deepest places, is the deepest place so far that we've discovered in the ocean. And it's over 6 miles deep, which is incredible. Now, a fun fact that I was just told that if you were to go to the very deepest part of the ocean, right around here, and you were to measure that all the way up to the tallest point on land, then that would be about 12 miles, which, if you're thinking about it laid flat, doesn't seem that tall, or that long, but of course tall, 12 miles tall is pretty incredible. All right, so here's another example from the Ocean Explorer. So if you wanted to go to oceanexplorer.noaa.gov, there's some really great photos. They have a great gallery. So if you wanted to go through their expeditions, they have some really remarkable footage. You can learn so much. I just usually type in NOAA pictures, and there's so many different categories to kind of jump into there. And then lastly, I'd like to go to the Nautilus because I think we have some videos that we can explore. Now this one I wanted to show you is a really specialized habitat. I think we can go big screen for this one. This is a video taken by Nautilus. So Nautilus has their ROV called Hercules, and then they have the second ROV that's right by them, and it's the Argus. And they can go down, the Hercules, when they're attached, they can go down 13,000 feet, which is pretty incredible. So this video is showing us that they had found not only hydrothermic vents, which we'll talk about in just a moment, which are these superheated areas in the deep sea, but they also found life down there that was pretty incredible. So I think we can go back to some of our other footage here. So a hydrothermal vent, or we can pause it maybe here on our video. There we go. So a hydrothermal vent is basically kind of a crack in one of our tectonic plates. And you have to imagine that when you're in the deep ocean, the elements are different than what we have here. So as you go deeper and deeper into the ocean, you increase pressure. They say for every square inch, it's like an elephant is pushing down. An elephant's weight is pushing down on every square inch. That's like a postage stamp. So the pressure is building and building and building because you have all of that water plus our atmosphere stacked on top. And that pressure is forcing salt water down into these cracks of our tectonic plates. And that cold seawater is heading down and it's mixing with minerals within the plate. It's getting super heated. So you have, of course, the core of our planet is very, very warm, which is seeps that come up of very, very hot salt water. It is also liquefying some of this tectonic plate and the ocean, the bottom of the ocean, which are creating these vents, as they call them. So you have superheated water that's very murky because it's liquefied, kind of these liquefied minerals basically that are now available in the water column. And when they settle, they kind of create these stacks, as they call them. So that's why they kind of have this nickname up here. Now what's really cool is this is a very unique ecosystem. I think we might have a couple photos of some of these ecosystems. Basically, it is very, very cold because of the lack of sunlight. Oh, this is a little bit different. This is a cold seep, which is a little bit different, but it is a deep sea habitat here. And in these deep sea areas, that's okay. In these deep sea hydrothermal vent areas, you have very, very warm areas that very specialized animals live. And they have these tube worms, which can be like a foot long. And they don't have photosynthesis for their food webs down there. They have chemosynthesis, which is a food web that starts with basically chemicals. So photo is in light, food from light. Instead, it's food from chemicals. So you have your chemosynthesis. And the animals down there are surviving with bacteria that help turn all those minerals that they're gathering from the water into food. It's really cool. So chemosynthesis is very unique, and there are a lot of animals down there that have a very, very different way of surviving. Anyway, so we can kind of take a look at the hydrothermal vent. I think we found, there we go. And so you can see this superheated water. This is a marker being placed by the deep discoverer. So this is from NOAA, and they're marking this area, which I think is really cool. So they had to have their ROV go down and mark this. These communities sometimes pop up as a resource, and then they can be around for a short amount of time. Sometimes they last for a while, but once this stops, if the plates move and it closes back up again, all of a sudden this whole ecosystem is kind of shut down. So it can be very chaotic, I would say, all of a sudden. Now, when we were watching that video, we were seeing a little skate, which is related to a ray, they think, using the hydrothermal vents to heat their eggs, which was really crazy. So it was the first time that they had seen that, and they were like, wait, there's eggs down here in this really superheated environment. And it was close to one of these hydrothermal vents. And then we have from Moon, does the white shark have any predators? Ooh, that's a great question. So Moon, yes, there are definitely predators of white sharks. The orca whale has been recorded to eat great white sharks. Isn't that cool? So I'm sure that being two predators, top of the food chain, there are some times where orca whales, maybe if they're vulnerable or younger, can be eaten by a white shark. But in this case, they've seen more instances of orca whales eating the great white shark. And they know how to do this by, it's been recorded, flipping the white shark onto its back. And something changes chemically in a shark's brain when they're flipped on upside down, and it kind of paralyzes them. And the orca had learned very quickly in this pod that they recorded, scientists recorded, that once they flipped the white shark over, that's it. It was food. It wasn't able to defend itself. So the orcas have the advantage of being very, very smart animals. All right, and then Laura asks, does the light from the ROVs affect deep sea creatures? That is a great question. They have recorded a lot of animals swimming towards the light. Now, in the deep sea where there's not a lot of light can attract animals. It is very interesting, and there are a lot of animals that can be very curious. I think there's even footage of a sperm whale that has come up to investigate an ROV. That was pretty cool. We've had some of the first recordings of the giant squid because of it being curious of an ROV coming up. And they were able to capture that on camera, which was some of the first footage ever of the giant squid. So yes, I think for some animals it's very attractive. They're not used to having that nice big light. A lot of the animals, and maybe we can go to our whale fall video here to show, some of the animals don't care. Some of the animals are like, hey, nice to see you. Hope you're doing okay. And don't really seem to mind that it's there. So this is from Monterey Bay, and this is from the Ocean Exploration Trust. So this is Nautilus, and this is what we call a whale fall. Now there's not a lot of resources down in the deep ocean because, again, light doesn't penetrate down there. When you have an animal that dies and sinks to the bottom, it usually provides a lot of food for animals. And the animals in the deep sea tend to have really really perfected being able to find these resources when they happen. And so this is an ROV kind of looking over. Wow, look at that. Look at all these octopuses. So this is a whale that had died, sank to the bottom, and ooh, those are special worms that eat the bones. Nothing goes to waste in the deep sea. There are all kinds of animals that kind of return all of these nutrients right back into the ecosystem, from animals that scavenge on some of the extra little pieces here, like our octopuses, which, because they have no bones, can fit into these nooks and crannies. And you can just see lots of animals trying to pick off the very last pieces. It might also be a place to meet another animal of your same species, because there's not a lot of food resources. They're pretty spread out. So whale fall could be a place for animals to kind of meet up. Like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. So yeah, it's kind of cool. So there are so many things to explore. I would recommend going to any of those websites if you're interested. There's so many cool videos on there. I think the last thing that I didn't talk about was mapping the seafloor. And they're able to do that using sound. So we're talking about some of those physical characteristics. We talked a lot about kind of the chemical and the biological, but there's a lot of our seafloor that we haven't mapped yet. We don't quite know what it looks like. Now we can do some of this from space, actually using satellites, but we can also attach sonar, and what's typically used is multi-beam sonar. So there's basically a path of sound waves that come down and they bounce off the seafloor, and depending on the material and kind of how tall, it changes those sound waves and gives an impression of what the bottom of the seafloor might be like. So this is from the Nautilus. The Nautilus, and you can kind of see the colors. This is really cool. This map is showing us also height, and this is the swath that they were using the multi-beam sonar. So they're traveling in a path, and as they're moving the vessel, they're able to emit that sound that bounces off, and when it's received again, they're getting kind of this picture of the bathymetry, or what we call the bottom of the seafloor. I think that's so cool. And there's all kinds of underwater canyons and mountains, and again, these really interesting things. As an adult, I guess I was surprised as I was learning more about the deep sea. I don't know why I thought it was all flat, but you start to learn that there's mountains and canyons and all these really interesting features, that bathymetry can be very different depending on where you are in the ocean. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope that has encouraged you to continue exploring, to continue to ask questions, and we'll be here for a whole new week of our Aquarium Online on Monday. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your weekend.